people in our audience that are on the ground, networking and organizing, also in this space in Spain to stop surrogacy and keep surrogacy illegal. And we hope that moving forward we continue to work together, because the more we work together, the stronger we are in fighting this huge agenda. I don't know. They're here for props. Anyway, I don't think we can hold them when we talk. We don't know what to do with them. We'll put them here. That's a good idea. We'll put them there. So I'm actually going to first, Kelly Martinez, I'm going to have her read her statement that she read at the United Nations. And we're going to put the signs down. Oh, you don't have them with you? Sorry. Anyway, we're going to let Kelly get her remarks. Kelly and I, along with Pierrette and Julie Bindle, who you'll hear from momentarily, we were all together recently in New York around the annual Commission on the Status of Women, and organizing an event around surrogacy. So we were thrilled that Kelly came. Since the film has come out, as is the case when in the work that we do, we have met more and more women who have contacted us about their unfortunate stories as serving as surrogates. And I personally know of 3 women who were surrogates for Spanish couples. And one of the women in the United States was carrying twins, and she was one day away from a full-term pregnancy in a scheduled cesarean section to deliver the twins for a Spanish couple, and the mother and the twins all died. So we actually had a real tragedy with her. And then after Kelly contacted me, another young woman who is in the U.S. in Texas was a surrogate for a couple in Spain and was horribly exploited. So anyway, I will, Julie, can you give her the microphone?
Thanks everybody for coming, and this is very important for me to be here. I'm hoping to bring some closure to my pain that I've had in the last year. Like Jennifer said, my name is Kelly Martinez, and I'm a mother of 3, and I'm a surrogate mother to 5. I gave birth to 1 set of twins for a gay couple in France, and had a singleton for a couple in the U.S. My last surrogacy was another set of twins for a heterosexual couple here in Spain. I was a commercial gestational surrogate each time, and my decision to become a surrogate has changed me, not for the better as I thought it would. I no longer support surrogacy, and this is why. I used to be proud and independent and an open-minded woman. I was proud because I'd been through so much in my life. I lost my brother to suicide, and yet I still had purpose. I was driven. Being pregnant fulfilled my need for being independent. I loved being pregnant, knowing the life that I carried depended on me 24/7. I was open-minded to the fact of working with a same-sex couple, even though my heart was hesitant. After my brother committed suicide and I was living in Iowa, I saw an ad in a newspaper about surrogacy. I remembered writing a paper on it in high school, and at that time I was against it. But after having 2 of my own children and seeing people struggle with fertility, I thought I could help these couples. I called the agency and spoke with a wonderful woman there, completed their application to be a surrogate. On my application, I indicated that I did not want to be a surrogate for a gay couple. I lived in a very small Catholic community in Iowa, and I did not want to bring attention to myself. The agency called me and said they had matched me with a gay married couple in Paris who longed for a child and were having difficulty finding someone to help them because they were gay. That I felt bad for them, so we agreed to be their surrogate. They gave me a video to watch on the joys of surrogacy. I was told I could claim the money I would be paid on my taxes or not. I was told my maternity clothes allowance could be spent on anything I wanted, and I was also told my name would not be on the birth certificate. We went to Oregon to meet the couple in person, and they were very sweet. We got along great. My husband and I were under the impression that they were married, and that's how this was possible for them to do surrogacy. 2 embryos were transferred, and I became pregnant with twins on the very first try. Closer to my delivery date, the agency called to tell me that immediately after the birth of the twins, I would have to go to Des Moines to get the birth certificates. This trip was difficult to make for me as I delivered one twin vaginally and the other by C-section. But we did as the agency required. I then received another call from the couple from the agency saying that I now needed to go to Chicago because something unexpected had happened and the couple couldn't leave the U.S. without the passports for the babies. I was fighting an infection postpartum, or post-pregnant, or after the delivery, but my husband and I loaded up the car with our 2 small children and made the trip to Chicago. When we got to Chicago, the couple met us at Denny's to tell us that surrogacy is illegal in Paris and that I would have to go to the French consulate with one of the men who was going to lie about our relationship. I tried to call my attorney, but it was too late, and I could not get a hold of anyone. I went to the French consulate the next day, and everything there was spoken French. I do not speak or understand French. I was asked to sign a 7-page document that I have no idea what it said. No one translated anything for me, and I was scared to death and shaking. I signed the papers and left. Once I was back in Iowa, I terminated my parental rights immediately. My last international surrogacy contract was for a couple here in Spain. Things went great until the couple found out that they were having 2 boys. They paid extra money to have a girl and boy embryo implanted. After the twins were born and taken back to Spain with the intended parents, I found out that they did not pay the medical bills. I reached out to Jennifer Lal, who I'm with here today, to help as my agency in the U.S. They didn't help at all, and it's actually a turn of events. When they found out that I was coming to Spain last week, the agency sent me the money to pay the medical bills. So for a year, it was a year in January, I've been struggling with the agency and the couple to pay the bills, and as soon as they found out that I was coming to Spain, the bills were immediately paid. So I'm glad that Jennifer could help me do that. I just wish I would have brought her name up before that. The bills, there was 12 accounts that went to collections, and their couple never responded to demand letters from either attorney, and they have an attorney here in Spain representing them that did not respond. So who I am now, I'm a broken woman who has been used, lied to, and exploited. I very much regret my decision to serve as a surrogate. I thought by me being a surrogate, I can continue what I love, being pregnant and helping others while making money for my family. If it sounds too good to be true, it most likely is. Both my international couples were through an agency. I have now had my eyes open to the fact that this is really about the money. It's not about the children. 2 international couples exploited me, lied to me, and have caused me much suffering and heartache. I'm speaking out today so that I might save others from the disappointments and hurts that I've had. To let you know that there is no protection for the surrogates against the exploitation. My life and my family will never be the same for the wrong these people have done to us. If I could take back my surrogacy journeys, I would in a heartbeat, because it's changed me for the worse. The agency didn't care about me. I didn't extend my family as I had hoped. I feel used and tossed to the side. My heart is forever broken, and my family is forever changed. The first couple reached out to me a few years back, saying I needed to do an adoption proceeding with them to remove my name from the Paris birth certificate. I was advised by attorneys not to. No one knows how the second set of twins are, or if the parents even accepted them for being 2 boys. I think about them daily, and I wish I could tell them how sorry I am for bringing them into this whole situation. I don't know if they will ever know about me, and I just pray and hope that they are loved and accepted.
So at this point, I just want to let you know that this conversation is live on Facebook on our Stop Surrogacy Now Facebook page. So just keep that in mind in case you don't want to go public on a question. And then also, if you want to tell people afterwards who missed this, you can share the film because it will be archived there. I'm going to next invite my colleagues Julie Bindel from the United Kingdom, Gary Powell also from the United Kingdom, and Pierrette Pape, who's here tonight representing the European Women's Lobby, to add their remarks. And then we'd be happy to have some questions from the audience.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you very much to Jennifer, to all of the support that we've had to come here to Spain. Thank you for having the correct legislation. And thank you to Kelly, because Kelly, I understand, as far as it's possible for me to understand, about how this has been a terrible ordeal for you, but very, very few people get to make a big difference for the good in the world, and you have done that. And you will continue to do that for the women who'll hear your story, and you'll do that for the children that grow up from surrogacy. And you probably have no idea at the moment just how much good you're doing. So thank you so much for doing that, Kelly. Really appreciate it. And you're a true survivor. And what I would like to say is about the dangers of normalising this industry. As Kelly has already explained, this is a trade. It is not an altruistic, do-gooding, charitable event. No surrogacy. No surrogacy is born of the good, for the good of the children. This is for profit. It's like the tobacco industry. It's like the sex trade. Both harmful, exploitative industries, and who have their profiteers and their propagandists who will churn out fake research to convince you that this is something that is for the good of the women who are carrying the babies, for the babies themselves, and for the intended parents, when in fact it is a deeply selfish, unnecessary act. There is no need, ever, to hire a surrogate mother. Not one time, not in any circumstances, not ever. Every single time commissioning parents pay money to use the womb of a woman, they are harming the woman, they are normalising an exploitative trade, and they are potentially harming that child. And I speak as a feminist, I speak from the position of being concerned about women's status in the world. And as we know, the best way to protect children is to protect the women who give birth to these children. And what this trade is doing is commercialising that very transaction, that very act. Now, when governments suggest that there is exploitation that we can somehow limit, that we can end, and that what you're left with is just a happy scenario of consenting altruistic surrogates, they're lying. They're lying to you in the same way that the tobacco companies would hold up those people who have smoked all of their lives and have never got lung cancer. And they're lying to you in the same way that pimps hold up the happy hookers and say, look, this woman has chosen it. They're just lies. As Kelly has said, there is only one reason that surrogacy exists, and this is money. It is a trade. And as we heard from the film, from the brilliant women who were interviewed in the film, if people really are desperate to be parents and to raise children, there are plenty of unwanted children and children whose parents have been unable to care for them. Already there, already born, growing up in children's homes and in foster care. I would rather spend money on counselling women and, couples in general who feel that their lives will end and that they will feel suicidal if they don't have their own biological children, than I would for this medical intervention into desperately trying to bring more children into the world, particularly when it's through surrogacy and other forms of assisted reproduction. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Good evening. My name's Gary Powell. I've been an advocate for gay, lesbian and bisexual equality since my late teens. I also oppose surrogacy. Both commercial surrogacy and so-called altruistic surrogacy. I do not believe there is any universal human right to be a parent, and I do not believe that the campaign to legalise and facilitate surrogacy has anything to do with real, legitimate LGBT equality. When I was at Oxford University in the 1980s, one of my tutors was the philosopher Baroness Mary Warnock, who had just chaired the Committee of Inquiry into Human Fertilisation and Embryology, which led to the famous Warnock Report in the United Kingdom. This influential report, in turn, led in the UK to the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act 1990, regulating human fertility treatment and human embryo experimentation, and also the Surrogacy Arrangements Act 1985. Baroness Warnock and I once discussed the ethics of surrogacy, and I recall her support for surrogacy arrangements so long as they did not involve commercial payment. To me at the time, that seemed to be a reasonable position. However, recent years have led to me finding out more about the issue of surrogacy, including how it can involve the exploitation and commodification of women and children, as well as medical and psychological harm to both, in addition to being a legal minefield. We know that the surrogacy process can cost up to $100,000, even more. If surrogacy does provide equality to wealthy gay couples in terms of enabling them to become parents, then it mainly provides this equality to those who enjoy the inequality of great wealth. Commercial surrogacy is mainly the privilege of the wealthy. I also regard so-called altruistic surrogacy with significant expenses payments as commercial surrogacy. In UK law, commercial surrogacy is illegal, although there's no regulation of it at all, and the police seem to be extremely reluctant to act against people who've clearly violated the Surrogacy Arrangements Act 1985. Where altruistic surrogacy is concerned, the expenses payments are suggested to be around the level of a maximum of £15,000 for a 9-month contract. As far as I'm concerned, that amounts to a salary. There have been some worrying developments as far as I'm concerned. Working terribly well, sorry. There have been some worrying developments in gay and lesbian politics in recent years, I feel. In the West, the progress in acceptance and legal equality for LGBT people has been phenomenal, and I applaud that wholeheartedly, as I'm a passionate advocate of LGBT equality. However, as is the case with other minority groups, a position has been reached where many people have become eager to virtue signal their support for LGBT rights and frightened to say anything that might get them accused of homophobia. This encourages a reluctance to challenge unfair demands and behaviour, and encourages positive discrimination, where LGBT people are treated more favourably than non-LGBT people, and in my view that's wrong. Positive discrimination in favour of person A is necessarily negative discrimination against person B. This has never been what I campaign for. I'm seeing it again and again. The worry is that, having made so much progress, there are sections of the LGBT community that are overreaching themselves, looking for new issues to commandeer as gay rights issues in quite an aggressive and unreflective way. The claimed right to have children via surrogacy risks becoming one such issue. I have already seen surrogacy being referred to as an LGBT rights issue. What seems to happen is that such claims can end up achieving a critical mass of support among LGBT people and well-meaning supporters and virtue signallers. When that happens, those views risk becoming mainstream. If a pretended right to surrogacy eventually succeeds in becoming a mainstream LGBT rights issue, people will start to get shouted down when they express opposition to surrogacy and accused of homophobia. More people will be frightened to express doubts and concerns. More and more bandwagon virtue signallers, as well as genuinely well-meaning people, will sing the praises of surrogacy as a putatively beautiful way of promoting LGBT equality. It will be very difficult to row back from that point if it arrives. For all the arguments about equality and progress advanced by the supporters of surrogacy, there seems to be scant consideration for the well-being of the people brought into the world via this route, or for the women psychologically and physically harmed by this process. As these issues were covered in the film, and as my colleagues are talking about them, I'll avoid detailing the potential psychological and physical harm caused to children and to birth mothers in this brief introduction. I would like to stress, though, and I regard this as very important, that the risk of harm to children implies that surrogacy is a safeguarding issue, Safeguarding issues tend to be taken seriously in the West these days, but it does not yet feel as though the safeguarding concerns associated with surrogacy are getting proper recognition. Surrogacy is also an issue that must include discussions about the exploitation of economically poor women and about the risk to women's health. Thank you very much.
Hola, buenas noches. My name is Pierrette, and I work in Brussels at the European Women's Lobby, which is the biggest umbrella organization for women's rights. And since 2013, we have a position on the issue of surrogacy. We are against all forms of surrogacy, and that was a decision made by all the women's organizations in Europe. I will just tell you a little bit about the European context and talk about altruistic surrogacy. So in Europe, you have a lot of different positions in the member states. It's not a European competence, so you don't have a European law. Each member state does what it wants. So you have countries prohibiting surrogacy, like Spain, like France, like Germany. You have countries prohibiting only commercial surrogacy, like the UK. And the rest of the countries are just in the loophole. There is no legislation, so surrogacy is happening in a way, in some sort of forms. What we've seen as women's organization is that the debate has came back some years ago, and for two reasons. One is that some American groups are coming to Europe, and you will have that, hopefully not, but next month, this kind of fair organized by organizations like Men Having Babies to promote commercial surrogacy. So they come and they explain to you how this is a great business and how you can just buy like a surrogate and the baby you're going to get. And this is a real industry that is showing its face. And I think we need to be aware that as soon as we talk about a desire that some people have, other people use that to create an industry, to create demand, and therefore to make sure that it's a business. The other aspect why the issue is on the agenda is because it's linked to some debates around same-sex marriage, LGBT rights, as Gary mentioned, and suddenly the meaning of sexual rights is changing, and some people use the wording sexual rights to say that it's a right to have children. So what they want as a personal desire becomes a right in society. The thing is that if you want it to be a human right, then the state has to organize it, like the right to water or the right to education. That's a real problem because it looks like any of your personal desire could become a right. And we are talking about what human rights mean. So what we see is that everybody seems to be shocked by commercial surrogacy because there's money involved, and it looks like it's the bad face of the business. But people seems to be thinking that altruistic surrogacy is okay. Altruistic, some people even call it ethical surrogacy. That's interesting. But we need to make sure to understand that altruistic doesn't mean free, doesn't mean gratis. As Gary explained, even in altruistic situations like in the UK, money is involved. In Belgium, they were discussing in Senate what the contract with an altruistic surrogate would be. And the contract is about how much sport she can do, whether she can smoke, what she can drink. So we are talking about restriction on people's lives and also a cost that is like a burden on the person who is a surrogate and who at the end of the day will ask the parents to pay. I want to share with you what's happened in Sweden last year. They were discussing surrogacy. So everybody is against commercial surrogacy. The feminist groups are against all forms of surrogacy. But there were some groups in favor of altruistic. And they were divided between themselves. One group said it has to be a family member. That's the real altruistic choice. This is beautiful. This is your sister. This is your cousin. It has to be family. Otherwise, you have it's difficult. But then, what if Jennifer is my only sister and I cannot get a baby? Can you imagine the pressure she's on? Because I would be expecting her to do that for me. And if she doesn't want, or if she feels afraid or whatever, can you imagine the pressure that means? So another part of the people said, no, it cannot be family because there's too much pressure. It has to be a person that you don't know at all. So now the question is, do we know people who, like a woman who doesn't know another couple and who would spend 9 months of her time like bearing a baby that she will give away just for a very, very altruistic reason for people she doesn't know at all. So we end up with a concept of altruism which we find very sexist because we always believe that women are super altruistic. This is in our nature, you know. Women are like this, they are altruistic, they care for babies. And it's also a concept that, at the end of the day, is always related to certain women, especially women from vulnerable situations, from poor country, who would be the one to be doing that. So we need to question the phenomenon of surrogacy from the gender perspective, because there is a gender perspective. We're talking about women being surrogates, but also from the economic and social class issue. At European level, the European Parliament and the Council of Europe have adopted a text saying that surrogacy is against human dignity and that the practice, because it's driven by money, is against human rights. And as a feminist organization, we believe it's very important to talk about what it means on a woman's body and how come we see a new form of exploitation of women's body using the new technologies as just a pretext to use the body of women. And we are seeing so many attacks on women's body at the moment, from the attacks on abortion, prostitution, surrogacy, pornography. We need to be aware that it's also linked to sexism and machismo.
Okay, at this point we're going to take questions from the audience. And I'm American, so I will insist on questions and not speeches. Sometimes people like to make a speech. But for the respect of the whole audience, if you have a question as it relates to surrogacy here in Spain or in the global context, if you have a question that you want to direct to a particular speaker or the panel in general, we would be happy to entertain for a few minutes some questions from the audience.
Sí, perdonad un momento, voy a explicar cómo van a funcionar las preguntas. Va a correr un micrófono, podéis levantar la mano para que se acerque a vosotros. La podéis hacer en español si queréis, o en inglés, como estéis más cómodos. Y en el caso de que la hagáis en inglés, intentaré traducir vuestra pregunta. I explain how we are going to do the questions.
Just a small question for Pierrette. Just I wanted to know, in Sweden now, surrogacy is forbidden or not? Because this, I understood that you were going to pass a law to forbid it, but I didn't understand if it passed or not.
I think it did pass, and now it's forbidden.
Thank you everybody for coming to Spain, to Madrid, and for talking about this important issue. Well, I study bioethics, I teach bioethics, and I am interested in ethical or bioethical issues in this topic. And particularly on, is there a study about the consequences about health in the mother and in the baby? Is it, studies with factor impact and important studies about this for taking decisions on this.
Yeah. Okay. This is sort of similar to the analogy of Julie's tobacco connection. It's going to take a long time to get the studies. I mean, this is still a relatively new practice. And in order to have good empirical data, we need large sample size, we need to study people over time. And the children born of surrogacy overwhelmingly are still quite small. And a smaller sample. We are, however, getting studies around children created through assisted reproductive technologies, which, of course, a surrogate pregnancy, the children are created that way. And we're seeing that there are problems, health problems, with children created through these different technologies. One hospital in my state of California looked at surrogate pregnancies in 1 year in their particular hospital, and they saw some pretty significant data as far as length of hospital stay was very long, much longer than a normal natural pregnancy because of the high-risk nature of the surrogate pregnancy. And of course, the cost of the hospitalization was quite high because these are high-risk pregnancies that require perinatologist, neonatologist, all the very specific and serious hospital needs. But it's still small and it's still new. But I think we can learn a lot from adoption and what happens when we remove children from birth parents and place them with strangers or move them to different countries and take them away from their origins. And so we can learn from other kind of disciplines, but that's sort of where we're starting from.
Thank you very much for coming once again. My question is for Kelly. I would like to know, she has spoken about how being a surrogate has affected herself. I would like to know how it has affected her family, her husband and her other children. Thank you.
It's crazy there, but my middle daughter, who just turned 13 in February, has probably taken this the hardest, due to the fact she was pretty small the first time I did surrogacy. We actually, when you're a surrogate, you go on their timeline, when you cycle with your egg donor, so you miss out on things. So it impacts my family. We missed my daughter's first birthday. We had to be in Portland for a doctor's appointment. We missed my son's first wrestling tournament for a different appointment. So she was pretty little at that age, but when I decided to do it this last final time, she actually asked me if I could die. And I had not heard of a surrogate dying, or a pregnant woman passing away. You see some stories, but not a lot. So I emailed the agency and I asked her if she's ever worked with a surrogate that passed away. She said, oh, no, everything goes good. Then when it came time for delivery and I almost died, my 13-year-old daughter is now on medicine, has a lot of depression. She's really scared. I can honestly say I don't know if she'll have kids, just because of the extent of what we've been through, and she's watched the mental damage it's done to me this last year. I gave up a good job because I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle the stress. My husband, who's with me here today, he's had to deal with a lot this last year, and my mental breakdowns are very random. Certain things in the day will trigger it. I don't want to be around babies anymore because I don't know what happened to the boys. So it's just so much, and it's so overwhelming. And I didn't think of them when I did it, so I feel very selfish that I did that to them and put them through that, and just to help my daughter, understand that everything's going to be okay. So that's why they're supportive of me being here, because if I can help another woman that's thinking about doing surrogacy, it's not worth the risk. One of the requirements is you have your own children, but you could die, and then your children don't have you, but whoever paid you has babies. It's not really worth the trade. They don't really highlight that when you decide to do it.
Hi, thanks a lot for coming to Spain and to spend some time with us. I have two questions. First of all, what would be the ratio of vulnerable women that is how are doing surrogacy? Like the ratio between vulnerable women from the India, Mexico versus the US. I would like to kind of know the ratio. And one question to Gary. I imagine the LGBT community reaction is not going to be really in favor of your position. So how is it being against the wave of LGBT? And I'm going to ask again about the ratio. How many people would you say is in favor and against in the LGBT community?
So I can speak just quickly about the ratio, and it varies from country to country. Of course, when you look at India, Thailand, these are desperately impoverished women. In the United States, though, it is low-income women. You will never find a Hollywood celebrity being the surrogate for her housekeeper. It is the housekeeper who is being the surrogate for the Hollywood celebrity. So it is an economic class issue for sure. Now the range of poverty varies from the United States, of course, than it does from India. And then I'll let Gary answer the other.
Pass it to Julie first.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Thank you. I have researched surrogacy in India and Cambodia and Ukraine, which is also a developing country, and it's all relative. So there are, as Jennifer said, that there are impoverished and vulnerable women in the global north, because of course you don't have to be desperately poor to be vulnerable. So there's always a vulnerability in a power relationship. And the reason why I raise Israel as a country that I research surrogacy in is because it has a very vibrant lesbian and gay community. I'm a lesbian. And I wanted to know why, despite the fact that gay men are not allowed, it's outlawed for same-sex couples to access surrogacy services, which is clearly discrimination. I don't want anyone to access surrogacy. I'm an equal opportunist. Right? I just don't want anybody to. But that was clearly discrimination. So I went to Israel to talk about this, and I met with a small group of gay men who said, we're against surrogacy because we're liberationists. We're not oppressors. We do not want to get our rights and then use those beneath us. And they said very clearly what Gary has said, which is not in our name. So you hear lots and lots of gay men who say, this is terrible. Why would we want to exploit women? And these are the men I interviewed for a book I wrote 3 years ago. And there were many of them just saying this is all part of the commercialisation of gay life, because everything can be commercialised. And they also said that commercial surrogacy for gay men is for the privileged few. It's for the rich, white, gay men. It's as simple as that. They're not wrong because they're gay. They're just rich, white men, like there are rich, white, straight men who don't care about those beneath them. Now, again, not all rich, white, straight men think that this is okay. So my message is that whoever thinks that this is exploitation, whichever social group that you're from, just speak out against it, as Gary is now.
Thank you, Julia. I agree wholeheartedly with what you've said. And in fact, it's a very interesting question as to how much support there is for surrogacy, whether commercial or so-called altruistic surrogacy, amongst the gay community, the LGBT community. And just from a straw poll among my friends, my gay and lesbian friends, I found that there's actually quite strong opposition from a number of people. I would say about 50% of the people I spoke to in my circle of friends were strongly opposed. I didn't speak to anybody who was strongly in favour, but the remainder were unsure and they didn't want to make a judgment. They were vaguely sympathetic to the idea of altruistic surrogacy, this idea that you could get somebody in your family or a friend to be a birth mother for you, and that there was no commercial transaction. But I really strongly believe that once people find out what surrogacy is all about and just how much harm it causes to children, and to women, and how much exploitation is involved, how unscrupulous some of the people running the surrogacy agencies are. I believe that the tide has the potential to turn, and that in fact it won't take roots, won't take hold in the gay community as an LGBT rights issue. But I'm still very concerned. I feel that unless it's opposed, unless people speak out against it, unless people don't fear being criticised for speaking out against it and don't fear being criticised and called homophobic, unless we actually oppose it now, eventually a critical mass could develop where it becomes seen as an LGBT rights issue. Once that happens, we know what happens. People will start to be shouted down, no matter how sophisticated their dissent, the dissent they express happens to be. So at the moment, I think it's a question of information. That's why events such as this one and the work done by Jennifer and my other colleagues here is so absolutely invaluable, to get the message out and let people know, particularly Kelly's work as somebody who's experienced harm at first hand, to make sure that people have information on which to base an informed judgment. Because if we allow the multi-billion-dollar global surrogacy industry to capture the information market, then people are going to be misinformed, dissenting voices are going to be squeezed out.
Perdonad, yo en español. Quería preguntarles, aquí en España el Instituto Valenciano de Infertilidad está buscando opciones frente a los vientres de alquiler, ofreciendo como alternativa los úteros de laboratorio, pero también las incubadoras artificiales. Entonces, ante esta realidad que se está estudiando, investigando, cómo este movimiento contra la subrogación recoge este tipo de problema de subrogación artificial, donde seguiría la manipulación y cosificación de los niños, aunque ya no se utiliza a la mujer como vasija.
Okay. What do you think? Because here in Spain, some institutes are trying to create artificial uterus or artificial bones. So, what do you think about this practice, if it's possible in the future?
What do we think about artificial uterus? Do you have an opinion? Well, I know I spent 20 years working as a pediatric nurse, so I'm a very strong supporter of maternal-child bonding versus being raised in incubators and machines and robots. I mean, pretty soon we won't be needed anymore, because I live in the Silicon Valley. We already have the driverless cars out there. So you don't even need, you sit in the Uber car and there's no driver. The human beings are going to be obsolete if we move everything to the laboratory.
En español, sí. ¿Vosotros creéis que estaríamos ahora hablando de esto si realmente viviéramos en una sociedad igualitaria?
Do you think that if our society would be equal, would we speak about this kind of discussion?
Very briefly, if we were equal, there wouldn't be surrogacy. It's as simple as that.
Kelly wasn't equal.
And if I may, I think we also need to question the consumer society we live in. It's about equality, but it's about mentalities when it comes to business and market. If we were in society, it depends on your definition of equality, but my definition would include that there is no competition, that there are no people poor, no people rich. Therefore, yes, there would be no surrogacy.
Okay, thank you for coming and this very interesting debate. Well, my question was because you were talking about just how we have to defend these things and to inform people. But I'm very worried how the media are normally treating these things, at least in Spain. There was a case 1 year ago about two people, it was a gay couple in Thailand, and all the media were unanimous on saying the surrogate won't cooperate because she's discriminating the gay couple. And at the end, I think her name, because always speaking about the surrogate is horrible, her name was Padita Kusol Sang, and at the end, I think she lost the case in Thailand. But I think that almost all the media are always more favorable to the commanders than to the mothers, and to the what they call the surrogates.
Always, I agree with you. The surrogates are invisible. This is why Kelly's presence is so important. The surrogates are spoken about as surrogates, not even surrogate women or mothers. There's a chef who writes for The Guardian, the same newspaper I write for, called Yotam Ottolenghi. He's Israeli-born, British citizen, and he's in a gay couple, and they've got two children born of surrogacy. And he wrote his story in The Guardian magazine, and it was all this wonderful, smiling, happy story. Pink cheek babies, everybody's happy. The woman was completely invisible. And the week after the story appeared, there's a letters page, a woman wrote and said, "I'll have Yotam Ottolenghi's babies." All smiley and nice, and oh, how wonderful, these handsome, rich men. And so, of course, this is how the favour always goes to the intended parents. One, because they're richer, so they appear more powerful and interesting. Two, because if it's about gay male couples, it's exotic. So it's, oh, men having babies, how lovely. If it's a straight couple that's infertile, it's triumph over tragedy. What's the story of the women? Now, there are journalists here, I'm one. We need to tell these stories. We do not need to be looking for surrogate women who are simply victims and one-dimensional characters who don't have a story to tell and a life to live. Again, this is why Kelly's so important. We need to stop just doing the bleeding heart stories or the triumph over tragedy stories and actually tell the truth. And those of us that blog, those of us that tweet, however we get our story out on social media or within the mainstream media, it's our responsibility to tell the truth.
That's why it's important that we're live Facebook streaming this tonight, because thousands maybe are watching in.
Hi, good morning. Well, good evening. If a woman chooses to take part in these practices freely, with no coercion, how come, and you tell them not to do so, how come, how would you respond to someone who asked you that you're not like vulnerating the freedom and the rights which you claim to protect? Thank you.
So I would want to answer to that because I wanted to add something. I think what we are discussing today is a society issue. We're discussing about how we as a society, we make decisions to live together and to protect the most vulnerable. So of course you might have one person who says, I want to do this. There might be one person who says, I like to be a slave. Or one person who says, I agree to work for the less than the minimum wage. But what we are discussing now is what the society as a whole needs to decide to make sure that we make sure that the most vulnerable have their human rights fulfilled, and that we don't exploit anybody, that there's no bad stories. I think it's important. There can be a lot of individual cases, but when we do politics, when policies are being made, it's about how it's going to impact all of us together. It's about how we live together. And just to go back to the question about if we were inequality, if we were in society where we are all equally, like economically also supported, but also if we were in societies where we stop being turned into ourselves, not individualistic societies where I have to have my car, my dog, my swimming pool, and my children. We also have to find a way to live together, and there are things that are possible, others that are not. Like, I will never be a president of the world, that's it. So I'm not going to claim that there's a right for me to be, but we have to find ways to live together, to respect each other, and to make sure that the most vulnerable are not affected. I think that's what humanity is about.
I think that's a very important question that you've asked, and something that needs to be looked at very carefully, because we are a society that prizes freedom and freedom of choice and individual rights. So if we're going to ban certain things and bring about a privation of freedom in certain circumstances, we need to make sure that we have a very strong justification for it. And in the case of the birth mother or the intended birth mother who wants to carry a child for somebody else and saying to her, you're not permitted to do that, one of the considerations I think there would need to be would be the impact, the potential impact on the child that she's intending to carry. If the child is going to suffer psychological harm as a result of being brought into the world as a result of a surrogacy procedure, then something that she's doing as a result of expressing her own free will is going to have an impact on another human being, a detrimental impact. And so in that kind of situation, there has to be the rights of both individuals and the needs of both individuals need to be weighed against one another. I mean, where children brought, we had some indication of what can happen to children brought into the world as a result of surrogacy in the film that we've just watched. And if we just think about the situation a little, and this is something that's very close to my own heart, as I shared with my colleagues earlier on, I came into the world because somebody else died, and I was told about that when I was a very young child. My parents had a baby girl who was unwell and had to go into hospital. Unfortunately, she died in hospital as a result of a hospital error. My parents were devastated, and their doctor, my parents' doctor, said that what you must do is have another child as soon as possible, and the other child they had was me. I only came into the world because my sister Susan died, and or somebody, I regard as my sister, even though of course we never met. So when I was a young child, I used to think about this, and I used to think, well, what's better? Is it better for me to exist, or would it have been better for Susan to exist, and for me never to have existed? And for a young child, that's a very powerful dilemma to cope with, and that affected me right into my adult life when I felt that I wasn't really in the world legitimately. I'd come here as a result of somebody else being harmed. And I share all of this because I think there's a potential for somebody brought into the world as a result of surrogacy to feel exactly the same predicament, that wondering whether the mother who carried them was harmed by the process, whether they agreed to carry them for financial reasons, under economic duress, whether their partner or husband pressured them into carrying the child. All of those kinds of concerns. I'm just wondering who was harmed, and if they have no further contact with their birth mother, just wondering where that birth mother is and what might be happening to them. Also, there are the other psychological issues that could affect a child would be questions such as, am I a commodity? I was paid for. I was bored. That's how I've come into the world. What does that mean about me as a human being? The mother who carried me for 9 months, did she carry me with love, or did she carry me reluctantly? Did she just carry me because she saw me as part of a business transaction? How am I meant to feel about being carried by somebody who may not have wanted to carry me, who may have just seen me as a burden and nothing else? All of those kinds of questions can affect a child. Also, as we saw in the film, how could my birth mother have given me away when they didn't give their other children away? So all of that just to say that the rights, the claimed rights of the surrogate mother in the service of her own individual freedom to go through a surrogacy have to be weighed against the interests of the child. And just one other point, there's the whole question in ethics, and I don't like to use this word with so many feminists in the room, but the question of paternalism, paternalistic laws, such as wearing one's seatbelt. That's a privation of liberty as well. You know, somebody might say, I know, I drive around all the time and I don't need a seatbelt. You know, I'm really safe. And you know, it may be, you know, in every case, bar 1 in a million, the person would be absolutely right. But unless there's a blanket rule and law that everybody must wear their seatbelt, then that 1 in a million person every year is going to be seriously injured. So the idea is that we keep to laws that are going to prevent harm being caused to other people, even if the statistical chance of harm being caused to us personally is very low. So they're just some reflections on why there might be a case, or I believe there is a case, for banning surrogacy, in spite of the right of persons or individual freedoms.
Maybe one more question, because we're over our time and people are leaving. Can we take her question in the middle?
Hola, buenas noches. Mi pregunta o reflexión va referida a la explicación sobre la primera herida. Teniendo en cuenta esta última pregunta acerca de la gestación altruista, la subrogación altruista, si no es posible a través de la prohibición en los países también hacer pedagogía acerca de ello y por lo tanto que sea un delito, se considera un delito que incluso aquellas mujeres que lo hacen de manera altruista no tengan en cuenta que esa intención de ser padres lo que sí tiene es la intención de crear esa primera herida, ese daño en la criatura que se crea, bueno, pues de manera intencionada, al igual que el mal intencionado que están creando con ello. Vale, espera, o resumo. Vamos a ver, la idea central es, si tenemos en cuenta el daño que se provoca con los vientres de alquiler en los niños que se crean de manera intencionada, si no tendría que ser prohibido que incluso las mujeres que lo quieran hacer de una manera altruista están provocando y por lo tanto son cómplices de aquel futuro daño que se va a provocar en estas criaturas y que por lo tanto, bueno, se considere como un delito tanto de los mal llamados padres intencionales y de las mujeres que se ofrecen como vientres de alquiler.
Okay. She told us about the first heart that there is in surrogacy. So she asked you that if the intended parents and the surrogated mothers, they are also compliant of this kind of heart, if they are part of this heart. The first, she talked about the first heart when a harm. Excuse me.
Pero tú lo que preguntas es si hay que multar a las madres surrogadas.
Ante la propuesta de que hay mujeres que dicen que lo hacen de manera altruista, vamos a ver, aquí se plantea...
Sí.
Claro. Yo también me refería en cuanto a la reflexión ante la pregunta que ha hecho, bueno, no sé si está en la sala, bueno, la pregunta anterior respecto a qué contestamos a esas mujeres, ¿no?, que llenas de bondad y llenas de generosidad.
Lo que ha dicho él, que los derechos del niño son insistidos.
Claro, pero me refiero a que si condenamos...
Okay, Piret's
me
going to
refiero...
answer the question. Okay.
If I understand right, what I would say is that in the case, my position would be that in the case of surrogacy, we're talking about people who need the body of somebody else, and then there might be women who freely decide to. But if we were to legislate, I think the legislation should be about prohibiting to buy somebody else's body. It's not about criminalizing the person who is doing it. It's not about criminalizing the surrogate. It's exactly like the debate on prostitution. We don't want to criminalize women in prostitution because they're already victim of the system, but we want to criminalize those who organize and who pay for sex. And here that's the same. So we're not gonna put the blame on a woman who, whatever the choice comes from, if we as a society analyze that it's not what the society wants for the benefit of the majority, we're not going to blame her, but we're going to say to people, you cannot do it, you cannot buy. And what Jennifer says is that we should say to people, you cannot buy or like subcontract altruistically from someone else to get a baby in Spain, but also outside. And the more countries are going to do that, the more difficult it will be for agencies to provide services, because it will be criminalized. I don't know how much concretely, but at least the message, like at societal level, will be that we as a society, we abolished this practice. We believe it's not okay.
So that concludes our evening together, and we thank you so much for your kind attention and for your commitment to helping us to fight surrogacy. Thank you.